Good morning, everyone. It's great to have everybody join us this morning for our next Digital Dash mini session. Today, we're talking about using whitespace characters to create multiple columns, format tables, and plain context. Now, this check sounds very technical. It sounds like it's a very long name. I've stumbled over the name multiple times already. But this check is actually a really easy check to understand. And the vast majority of times when you see this check, this is just going to be a review item. It's not going to require any kind of fixes or changes. So with that, let's dive right in. As usual, we're going to cover today the description of the check, who's affected, and how to review or fix the problem. Please post any questions you have into the chat space here. For the meeting chat space, and then we will get the answers out to everybody later today. We'll also be posting this recording onto our YouTube page. So this check, what is it about? So let's start at the beginning with our principles. This is about making sure all of the content on our websites is perceivable, that whoever is visiting the page, regardless of what technology they're using to visit the page, can understand the information, the relationships, and in this case, that if there is a meaningful sequence of events or content, that sequence is preserved. What we want to do is avoid using whitespace for controlling layout or formatting. And so this is similar to how we don't want to use a data table just to control layout. We also don't want to use whitespace. Web language, HTML, has specific meaning, and it communicates that meaning when we use it properly. So if we are trying to communicate certain structural meanings, we need to use the right tags and not just use whitespace. In addition, assistive technologies help with all of that. So in the case today, if whitespace is being used to format something on a page, it's going to cause a problem for screen readers and assistive technologies. But it's also going to cause a problem for people who use mobile devices, who may have to zoom in really far because of vision problems. And so by using these characters to try to control the layout or formatting or to create a table, it ends up causing problems for lots of different people. And this is another one of those checks where it actually impacts everybody, not just somebody who may have a disability. So let's start at the very beginning on what a whitespace character is, because that's not really a human understandable term a lot of the time. But a whitespace character can be a space, a tab character, line breaks, or carriage returns. And for our younger audience, back in the days of typewriters, there was a little bar that moved across the top. That was a carriage. A carriage return was simply a jump down line. So in computer terms, a line break goes down one line, a character return or carriage return usually goes down a line and a half or 2 lines. So that's why I have this little space. But as you can see, you can't really tell that there's anything in there, but there's lots of white space in there. This tool, though, and the reason why this error shows up for a lot of folks is because it's not just looking for white space characters. In fact, that would not be very valuable because we use tabs and spaces all the time. What it is looking for is repetitive white space characters. It's looking to see for certain characters that even print if those are being used inappropriately. So some of the common characters that are sometimes used to create tables artificially, the pipe character, a dash, M dash, N dash, underline, underscores, the plus sign. Whenever the scanner sees any types of these non or printing characters and with white space characters around it, this error message, or I should say review message, is going to show up. And I'll show some examples of where it looks like. But after the last several sessions, you all know what a data table looks like. This is a properly formatted table. It's communicating structure and information. But an incorrect table, and the way this often appears, is something like this, where if it's viewed at its intended width, this is trying to communicate structure and meaning, but it's using white spaces, tab characters, carriage returns, lines in order to communicate that structure. And by looking at this, we know that the first column is the day of the week. The second column is what's for breakfast. Third is lunch. Third is dinner. But if I'm on a mobile device and I have a much smaller screen, the table's going to end up looking like this. And while the first row still kind of works well, all of a sudden breakfast and lunch and dinner are all getting mixed in together. So this is an example where with my poor eyesight, the formatting of this table and the intended meaning is going to get completely lost. If I was using a screen reading device, because screen readers read from top left to bottom right, depending on the language of the user, it's going to read it as menu, breakfast, lunch, dinner, Monday, 2 fried eggs, tomato soup, garden salad, bacon, hamburger, fried chicken. And all of a sudden that separation between breakfast, lunch, and dinner is completely lost to screen readers. So this is an example of a really poor choice of using white space to format a layout and why it's a problem. Another common way, before HTML was invented, even honestly back to the typewriter days, to create tables, we would use a lot of those characters that I mentioned earlier to help artificially create a table when we were printing out a sheet of paper. We have HTML now. We have specific programming languages and style language elements that we should be using for formatting and conveying meaning. And so this is a type of table. Hopefully we don't see it too often, but this is an example of where this error would still show up, even though it's not really the white space that's causing it, it's all those characters around. So before we dive into what it looks like, I want to remind folks that there are 3 different types of messages that we'll see in the optimized system: errors, warnings, and reviews. This is a review item. It always requires a human review because a computer can't determine one way or the other if it's a problem. In this case, because it's looking for repetitive white space characters or those certain printable characters, anytime it sees those, it's going to post those up. There's going to be a lot of false positives with this. It just means humans need to take a look at it. You may not actually have anything you need to fix. So let's switch over into Optimize. And the way we always want to start with these types of checks, we'll jump over into our accessibility module and in our checklist. And this is a level A check. And I'm just going to quickly search for white space. And you'll see I've got my check here, links to the help center, my action. And on this site, it only appears on one page. This is one where you're probably not going to be using the Optimize tool. You're going to use the browser extension. And I'll just click on page details here to show what it looks like. Because for this one, you really do need to go to the page, see it in the context of the page to understand most of the time why that error is happening. So in this case, on our training page, it's seeing this paragraph, and I can look at this code. And if you're familiar and you know what the code is showing, you may be able to identify why the error is there and whether it's a problem. But if we actually switch over and look at the page and use our browser extension, and I've already pulled it out so that it would show here, I can click on the highlight button and it jumps directly to the page where the error is occurring. And in this case, I'm not trying to communicate any meaning or intended sequence through the use of white space or through the use of those special characters. Instead, this error is showing up because our Drupal 9 training, the basics, and Drupal 9 training advanced all have pipe characters that are separating out those. And so because it saw multiple pipe characters and it knows that there's spaces before and after those pipe characters. It's telling us we need to go and make sure we're not trying to communicate a meaningful sequence or artificially create a layout. And in this case, we're not. There's no accessibility problems here. So all I'm going to have to do is click cancel. And I could look at the HTML code if I wanted, but there's really no reason in this case to do that. And I simply click review and confirm. This is something that's only going to appear on this page, so I don't necessarily need to go through and fix it on a ton of different pages. So I wouldn't use the fast track tool for something like this. But now that I've marked it as reviewed, when I switch back over into Optimize, that decision is being recorded, and so eventually my score is going to come up and be fine. So the how to review or fix. We kind of just went through there, but there's a few questions you should ask when you have this error and when you're looking at that particular section of the page where this review item showing up. Ask yourself, is it intended to provide meaning, structure, or any type of organization for that content? If so, use your data tables. That's what the tables are intended for. Are you simply using all of that white space or special characters in order to control the style or the layout of the content? In that case, you should use the right styling techniques. If you have a visual editor, there's usually table functions in there or headers or other ways of controlling the styling without using any type of those white space characters and, some of those non-white space characters. If any of those things are present, you do need to change your content and make it fixed. And that's where you can use the Mark as Fix button. And the next time Optimize scans your system, it's going to check to see if those white space characters or non-white space characters are present. The other thing to do is look at the way the content is displayed on the page. Will it change the meaning of the content or the proper sequence of how you want that information communicated if the user uses a different zoom ratio, they really zoom in close, if they change from a fixed font to a variable font, those types of things. If you do have any repetitive white space characters that you're using from format, you do want to remove those. But once everything's cleaned up, simply mark that item as reviewed and Optimize, and then you can move on. And I'll show you an example. Well, on this page, because this isn't being used as a table, if I zoom in, the entire layout you'll see wraps around and changes. Whoops, I zoomed in way too far. Sorry about that. The entire layout here is changing, but I'm not losing any meaningful sequence by zooming in at 200%. That type of robustness is what we're looking for an accessible technique. All right, so with that, we do have a bunch of different resources available if you'd like to know more information. As I said, this check is actually really pretty simple. It's just making sure we're not artificially formatting a page. We're not losing any of that meaningful sequence or structure on the page. So if you'd like more details on the specific standards within the WCAG guidelines, we've got that there. We also have a couple of tutorials. If you really want to dive in and learn about HTML and CSS, you can do that. That's not really required for this particular check. Instead, it's just about looking at it, making sure there's no meaningful sequence intended, and marking it review if it's a false positive. So with that, we did wrap up just a bit early, but I want to thank everybody and remind folks we have one more mini session coming up on next Tuesday, just after the holiday weekend. And in this one, we're going to change our focus now away from tables and formatting structure into color contrast. And so while the primary check we're looking about is the link text color contrast, there's actually a couple of checks we'll cover at the same time about that. So with that, thank you all very much for attending. later today, we'll have the video posted on our playlist. And have a great Thursday, everyone.